These folks are going to do some lightning talks, which I'm really excited about. It's an awesome panel, and I'm just going to briefly introduce them all, and then I'll let them take it away. So we're going to go from left to right. That's Rebecca over there on the left. She is a worker owner at Valley Green Feast, which she started working at after graduating from UMass with a bachelor's in kinesiology. Thank you. So while at UMass, she became a co-manager at the People's Market, an entirely student-run collective business that focused on providing the community with socially, environmentally conscious snacks. Then she fell in love with the cooperative business model and gained a lot of valuable experience in its creative and open atmosphere. Rebecca was informed by Valley Green Feast by a member of VOC and knew it was a special opportunity to become part of such an innovative business model. So she now, at Valley Green Feast, focused on marketing for the business and spends her time outside the co-op teaching dance. But she's going to be wearing the VOC hat today, which is the Valley Alliance for Worker Cooperatives. So she'll tell you more about that. And then we have Suzette Snow-Cobb, who is the co-general manager of the Franklin Community Cooperative, which is right down the street. It's a consumer cooperative with 2 natural food stores, Greenfields Market and McCusker's Market. She's worked with co-ops for over 25 years. The last 13 as general manager with a primary responsibility for marketing and membership. Suzette is currently pursuing a master's in management of co-ops and credit unions through St. Mary's University in Nova Scotia. And she serves on the board of the neighboring Food Co-op Association and the Valley Cooperative Business Association. She lives in Turner's Falls with her spouse and her son. And then there's Brian, Brian and I worked together at TESSA. Brian adventures in popular education and cooperative economic movements began in 2005 when he founded a record label that soon became a worker collective. In 2007, he facilitated a participatory class at a community learning center for teens in Mass about starting cooperatively run record labels. And that experience cemented his dedication to democratizing education for democratizing our workplaces, economy, and society. So since then, Brian has designed workshops, curricula, board games, and other educational resources on topics ranging from people's history to co-ops and social change movements. And as I mentioned before, we're both worker owners at TESSA, but Brian is also a sales rep from Equal Exchange, so he's going to be talking about talking about Equal Exchange today. And then we have Becky over here. She is going to be wearing the VGF hat, Valley Green Feast. She has a deep passion for food and a talent for creating food that accounts for food allergies and lifestyle choices. Becky has her BA from University of Puget Sound and began her work life with food while attending Marlborough College and worked there as their vegan, vegetarian, and gluten-free cook. Since then, she has worked with health food stores and restaurants, spreading the need to keep options available for those who cannot eat certain items. Becky plans to complete a holistic healing through food nutrition program to better serve this passion. When Becky heard about VGF having an opening for a new member, she was living in Seattle. She felt strongly about wanting to be that new member, and she moved across the country a little earlier than planned to try that, make that option for her. And then, so Becky's going to be talking about Valley Green Feast. And then we have Lisa DiPiano, who's a certified permaculture designer and teacher and faculty member for the Yestermorrow Design Build School and the University of Massachusetts. She is co-founder of the Montview Neighborhood Farm, a human-powered urban farm and edible forest garden in the Connecticut River Valley, and she previously rode with the worker-owned cooperative Pedal People, which she'll be talking about today. And then, last but not least, we have Urban Crowell, who serves as the executive director of the Neighboring Food Co-op Association, a cooperative of more than 25 food co-ops and startup initiatives with a combined membership of more than 90,000 people across Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. Together, the co-ops at the NFCA are working toward a vision of a thriving regional economy rooted in a healthy, just, and sustainable food system and collaboration among co-ops. Prior to joining the association, Urban worked with the Cooperative Fund of New England and the Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives. For more than a decade, he was a member of Equal Exchange, a worker cooperative and pioneer in the fair trade movement. And Urban holds a Master's of Management, Cooperatives, and Credit Unions from St. Mary's in Nova Scotia and serves on the board of the New England Farmers Union and the National Cooperative Business Association. And he teaches an online Introduction to the Cooperative Movement course at the University of Connecticut. So I'm going to let them take it from here, but they're going to be doing 4 to 7 minute lightning talks, and then so hold your questions, and then we'll have a nice open chunk of time at the end for you guys to ask questions and help connect the dots. So thank you.
I am Rebecca. I am one of the 4 worker owners of Valley Green Feast, which you're going to be learning more about later. And I'm also the representative from my collective to the Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives, which is an integrated system of support and development for cooperatives in our area. So what is a co-op? That word gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes, you don't have as much of a background as to what that really means or what makes a business a co-op. So a cooperative is a type of business that brings users, owners, and controllers together into one group. There's a lot of horizontal management going on within a cooperative. Cooperatives often address human need instead of human greed, which is kind of what we're seeing a lot of in the corporate world today. There are many different types of co-ops. You can have ones that are owned by their workers. You can have ones that are a bank. Credit unions are actually a type of cooperative. You can have producer co-ops, which relate to agriculture in the sense that sometimes farmers get together and they say, hey, I really can't afford buying this piece of machinery. Let's go in on it together. Let's share land. Let's share resources. So having that option in the many different types of sectors is a really great one to have. So cooperatives kind of all base themselves upon these principles that were created in 1844, which is funny to think that there are real roots within this movement, and this is something that's been progressing since then. So the cooperative principles highlight the fact that anyone can be a member of a cooperative. Voluntary and open membership is a really important aspect of a cooperative identity. A cooperative should be democratically controlled, and the things that are going on within the cooperative should be distributed amongst the people that are working there. There should be control over finances. You should be able to know what's going on with the money in your business or the business that you're a patron of. Cooperatives should always maintain their co-op identity. No matter who they're working with, what they're doing, that is a strong identity to have, and representing that fully is really important. Another one is educating about co-ops, which you guys are kind of getting a little bit of today. So most people that are working in co-ops are excited about it, want more people to know about it. So education is a huge aspect about spreading something that you believe in. Another one is intercooperating. So using another co-op business, sharing resources between the two, strengthening the system, supporting other businesses that you believe in, that you can trust. It's kind of difficult. You don't really know who you can trust so much in the business world today. But cooperative businesses tend to be really transparent. The last one, which I think is really important, is connecting to the community that your co-op is in, addressing the needs of the people that are going to be shopping there or that are going to be a part of there. So really connecting to where you are and having that form and change depending on the people that are involved in it. So the Valley Alliance of Worker Co-ops is a great example of co-ops working together. There are 9 worker-owned businesses in the Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives that span the whole region of the Pioneer Valley. This includes Palomado Group, Gaia Host, Brattleboro Holistic Health Center, Collective Copies, Co-op 108, Pedal People, Valley Green Feast, Collective Copies, and TESSA, which is the Toolbox for Education and Social Action, the newest co-op to the VOC network, which is really exciting. We've been growing. We're adding more members every year, which is really exciting. So these businesses work together to strengthen the movement, and they do this by meeting regularly, sharing resources, intercooperating, and signing on to put a percentage of their annual surplus into something called a development fund. And this development fund is a shared pool of money that we get to decide where it goes. We get to decide if we want to loan money to an existing cooperative to maybe expand their business. Maybe we want to help a startup and loan money out for something to be created, or anything else that we come to consensus on. So it's a really wonderful and unique thing within our community, within our region, and within our country. Though this is not really unique within the world, this aspect of co-op-led development. I urge you to look into a place called Mondragon in Spain or Emilia-Romagna in Italy, which is a region pretty similar to the size of New England that functions entirely cooperatively. Education, school, law enforcement, these things are cooperative, and it is working on a really large scale. So look into that. It's really exciting. So to bring it back, how are the co-ops in VOC affecting the food system? You heard about the Auto Group and the Holistic Health Center and stuff. There are some more examples that we're going to get to touch on later. But one that I think is really interesting and abstract in a way is Collective Copies, which is kind of just a run-of-the-mill, copy shop printer. You wouldn't think that there's too many things going on there above and beyond. But they fought very hard to carry the line of equal exchange products, which is fair trade products. They brought it into their copy shop because they believed that they wanted to, kind of educate the customers that were coming into their business about what else is out there, what businesses you can trust. And also they carry the line of Fedco seeds, which are co-op and organic grown seeds. So having that right in a copy shop is really kind of closing that loop for people and kind of bringing that education into a unique place. So cooperatives, there's a lot of different kinds. There's a lot of different ones in the region, but we're all working for the same goal. We're working together, we're supporting each other, and we're really just trying to move towards a more cooperative economy.
Food and the food economy is a pretty big part of my life. I've worked at the food co-op for 15 years. We actually moved to the area partially because there was an established food co-op in the area, and we helped start the community garden in Turners Falls, and brought the farmers market, the Great Falls Farmers Market, having a site in Turners Falls. My husband is a cook and a sometime caterer, and my son is going to be graduating from the tech school and the culinary program. So we're very wrapped up in our food economy in multiple ways. And when I talk about our co-op, sometimes I can get into the facts and figures of it, but I think partly what I'm going to do in my 5 minutes is not really dwell there so much, but to give you a little bit of, Rebecca gave an excellent overview of co-ops in general, and our co-op is a consumer co-op, and our member owners are individuals, and the benefits are extended to the household, but we have one class of membership as a consumer. And our little over 2,000 member households elect the board of directors, and the board of directors hires the general manager. And in our case, they hired our general management team. And the board is responsible for hiring the general manager and having the oversight. And they're also responsible for being in touch with the membership and setting the direction of the co-op, the overall big picture direction. And then the manager and staff and volunteers can carry out that mission and vision. A few years ago, our board of directors did some work on our what we call our end statement, our big picture mission. And I'm going to read that. There's numerous bullet points, but the overall one is that the co-op will be an innovator and collaborator in the process of creating a regenerative and sustainable local community, economy, and food system. And it's a pretty big vision to say that our co-op of our 2 stores and our membership and what we do in the community is going to work on trying to bring that home for our community. So we have an interest in our food system as a whole. While we sell food, we have an interest in supporting our local and regional system as a whole. So one of the questions we were given was, where do we sit in the supply chain? And we obviously sell food on the retail in the retail stores, but we have a class of membership that are our owners, our consumers, but we also have other stakeholders that are invested and interested in the success of our individual food co-op. There are workers. We employ 75 staff people. Our farmers and producers, and we buy from over 100 local and regional farmers, and our community and other cooperatives. A few years ago, when Greenfield did a study of the downtown assessment, the co-op Greenfield's Market store was identified as an anchor business in downtown, which is a goal that was not so much on the horizon when the co-op started. They didn't view this necessarily themselves as becoming an anchor business, but there's that has happened because of the interest of the members and staff to be able to bring about the importance of access to food in the form of a cooperative. And if you think of our co-op as a community asset, as Rebecca mentioned, the co-ops in northern Italy, they view their co-ops as community assets. They're not just for the use of the people right now. If we think about it in that way, then another stakeholder group is the generations that come after us. And so we're working for providing for our members now, but also for next generations. So we have 2 stores, and that's not the whole of the co-op, Greenfield's Market and McCusker's Market, but it's a little bit bigger than that. At one point, our view or picture that the members had was this one store. The co-op was the store. They were that's how it was viewed, and we're not. When we expanded to 2 sites, we needed to adjust our image of what is the co-op, and we've always had a bigger image of than just the store. There's the community component, but it became more dominant that we needed to look at that in a way. So what the co-op is these 2 sites, but it's also the coming together of people and being able to do things together that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do on their own. We are in the business of buying and selling food, and our members certainly participate as buyers, but we also are interested in sharing information, having opportunities for people to come together to understand where their food comes from, to who grows it, who makes it, why would it be important to buy from businesses or other co-ops that grow food sustainably. And so basically the co-op is a conduit to provide opportunities for people to get together and learn about our food economy, food issues, share ideas, and share challenges, and think about it, how they can take steps to better the situations that they're not happy with. Through our working member program, we have people delivering surplus foods to shelters, teaching cooking classes, maintaining our bulletin boards, information bulletin boards, organizing book discussion groups, and many other areas that people do volunteer work for. We're able to put, because we're a successful business, we're able to put resources into supporting things like the Greenfield Town Farm. We're a big sponsor of the Green Fair and the NOFA conferences and other events around food and the ecology. And members worked on our cookbook that we have available, and then they also put together the Franklin County Food Resources, a whole assessment of where are the different places that food is available, and we distributed that to many sites throughout Greenfield and the county. So recently I've been thinking a bit about our picture of the food system, and it might be a bit of a stretch to think about this, but to suggest that our food, our real food, and the growing and access to food should be treated as a common, like the care of our forests or waterways, how we the importance of caring for that whole system that we are all partially and collectively responsible for and benefit from. And so with cooperatives, we have opportunities to be able to participate in caring for that, to benefit our community and to benefit ourselves. The question of like how can people participate is that there's many opportunities to get involved with our co-op right here, and by joining or just by shopping, and then learning about other types of co-ops too.
I'm Brian. I'm not a member of Equal Exchange, but I just work with them a lot, and I also sometimes do demos on their behalf. But I would say I'm a fanboy of theirs. So I've come here I spoke with them, and they asked me to represent their mission and message here. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm sure that there's other folks here at this table who could speak to them a lot as well. So feel free to jump in. But in sum, Equal Exchange is a worker-owned co-op, as Becca explained what that is, and that means that the workers equally own and equally manage the business. And this co-op in particular, Equal Exchange, is one of the trailblazers in the fair trade movement, and mostly focuses on things like coffee, chocolate, and tea. There's some delicious chocolate back there, which I encourage you to sample, which you may have already done. But it also distributes other things like olive oil, bananas, nuts, and so forth, in an ever-growing list of products, which is very exciting. And I'm not going to be doing the complexity of the fair trade movement and what fair trade is justice here, but I think I can give you an overview and what Equal Exchange does and how that improves our food system. In sum, fair trade is the idea of offering fair prices for products to farmers, especially in developing countries, rather than having the farmers exploited in nearly slave-like conditions, which a lot of our products that we consume really is the case for chocolate, coffee, et cetera, on a daily basis. Sort of slavery surrounds us, and the idea of fair trade is to break that, and not through charity, but through mutual aid and direct trade. So in fact, during the 80s, when Equal Exchange started up, it was actually one of the major players in essentially establishing a fair trade coffee as a market. So kind of one of the roots of the modern movement around coffee comes from Equal Exchange, which is again a co-op. So today, however, there's a really wide disparity in the fair trade movement. Not all the groups involved are as dedicated to the original concept behind the idea. So for example, major food conglomerates are trying to force huge plantations into the model, where workers are paid, what amounts to maybe their minimum wage in their country, but that still allows these farmers to be terribly exploited. Equal Exchange, however, remains as equally committed to its original idea, working with small farmers that own their farms together as a co-op, democratically, and that are not exploited on large-scale plantations. So that kind of, in some means, it's good for the people, it's good for the planet, and also good for your taste buds. So Equal Exchange isn't super involved in like a local food system, because most of the products it supplies are from around the world. So instead, Equal Exchange really seeks to provide access to co-ops, making important and radical changes to the food system globally, and it's really changing kind of the worldwide food system from an exploitation basis to a solidarity basis. And by linking people like you to small farmer co-ops, you're getting better food that's made in more sustainable ways, and it's giving control and livelihood to those who produce your food. Rather than some rich people getting richer off of other people's labor and hardship. So in the way Equal Exchange does things, the money goes directly to the small farmers who produce their food, which allows them to reinvest it in their own homes, in their communities, and their business, which is very exciting. So one of the important things about Equal Exchange is that itself is a worker-owned co-op, as I mentioned. And when you look at a lot of the fair trade companies today that are trying to do harm to or that are doing harm to the movement, they've either been bought out or started by mega food conglomerates, meaning that these platforms use plantations and aren't really fair trade, or they're using the fair trade movement to directly fund, their operations, their other operations that use plantation-like systems, and essentially creating a lot of direct responsibility for near modern day slavery in the food production system. With Equal Exchange, however, that's not going to happen because the company is democratically owned by the workers. In order to be bought out, they would all have to agree to sell their company and compromise their values. And in fact, in their bylaws, they say that if they're bought out, they have to dedicate those funds to the fair trade movement. So it's not going to happen which is the case that's happening to a lot of other companies, which really speaks to the importance of the worker co-op model, itself in the fair trade movement. So, so like I said, this really rarely happens with worker co-ops, and if you look at like a diagram of fair trade producers of, say, chocolate, you see that Equal Exchange is one of the few remaining large independently owned distributors. One of the things that folks in this room can do to help strengthen the fair trade movement is to get involved in spreading the word, organizing, getting it into your schools, stores and restaurants, and learning more about what's going on. So, for instance, Equal Exchange has launched an authentic fair trade campaign, which is still young and evolving, but it's seeking to challenge those companies and other organizations that are trying to water down the fair trade movement for a bigger profit by including large-scale plantations into the fold. So to find out more, you can go to Equal Exchange's website, equalexchange.coop, or you can check out some of the postcards that are in the back by the chocolate, because you're going to want some more chocolate before you leave. And so you can find out more via both those means. But by getting involved, we can take on those companies exploiting fair trade and workers and farmers and the planet and work together to strengthen an international network of small, independent, cooperative farmers who are building a better food system, a better life for themselves, their communities, and world. And as I said, I'm not a part of Equal Exchange, but I am a huge fan, and I definitely recommend that you become fans and involved with authentic fair trade as well.
I'm the newest member to Valley Green Feast. It was said in my description I did just move over from Seattle. I did move over earlier because I knew about the position with them, and I really did want to be considered possibly the new option. I've always worked with single proprietors, and the difference that I've found, like even though I incorporated a lot of local foods, incorporated using local businesses for our vendors and our suppliers for restaurants, the bottom line, that wasn't the business owner's idea for the restaurant, that wasn't the business idea for the business, and so therefore the consumer kind of lost knowing that most all of their products were organic, were local, I love the fact about it, but that wasn't something that had gone to them, and I really wanted to use my passion and work with a business that was what they were trying to bring out. And Valley Green Feast, very much so, is part of the local food system. We work with about 30 different farms locally and bring those farms to people's doorsteps. So we are the farmers market to your door. A lot of these farmers are farms that either don't have access to be at farmers markets themselves, have extra surplus product that we can utilize and can bring to doorsteps or bring to people that also don't have access to farmers markets. And so we fulfill a great niche in the environment of being able to provide these local products directly to consumers. One of the things I really enjoy about us, Rebecca's usually our presenter, so this is my first time. One of the things I really like about us is that we do offer a discount to EBT clients. So we offer EBT for all of the things that we sell, but also all of our produce is 20% off to EBT consumers. And due to the fact that they oftentimes don't have as much access to local farmer markets in their neighborhood, and or it's a little bit more difficult to get to them, it's nice that we can drop this off right at their doorstep and offer them a discount. We also work with the YMCA in Holyoke, offering no delivery fee to anybody that wants to pick up at that YMCA, whether or not you're a member of the YMCA or not. You're able to participate in that. We utilize working with Pedal People. All of our deliveries around Northampton are pretty much delivered via bike with Pedal People. So we try to utilize as many local and bringing things to the local environment as possible. We are a collectively run cooperative. We all equally own the business, but we also all equally make decisions as far as anything that we go forward on, and I think that's really important as far as one reason why it's really special to be a part of our group. We enjoy that we like to make everybody happy within our group decisions. So what else do I want to put? We use collective copies. Like we incorporate as much as we can within the local system. We are a completely female-run cooperative at the moment, kind of just by what has happened, but we deliver anywhere between 1,500 to 2,200 pounds of food a month. We do this by car. We do this with our lovely selves. And we think that's pretty impressive, all from local farms. And it's really just great that the community has outreached and we are only growing at this point. So we think that's a good thing. We spread education within the system. We go to, Rebecca, but oftentimes we all go to local schools, doing talks for classes, doing talks for teachers. Over this summer with Rebecca's position with the YMCA, she has summer camps that she's able to plan, but we also are going to collaborate with that and have a week that we can do cooking classes with the children that participate, as well as a week that we can do gardening with the children. We hope in the future to add on some pre-made meals, as well as starting to add on some farm-to-school programs in order to better serve the community as well.
I'm here representing Pedal People. Thank you so much for coming, and this is a really exciting conversation to be a part of. And Pedal People is a worker-owned, bicycle-powered hauling and delivery service, and we operate out of Northampton, Massachusetts. We just celebrated our 10th year being in business, which is a huge milestone for us. And we have over 500 customers, both businesses and residents, that we pick up trash, recycling, and we are currently the only hauler that picks up residential compost. So we take that as well. And one of my favorite parts about being a pedal person, or former pedal person, I worked there for 6 years, was we represent sometimes a gritty underbelly of the food system. And we deal with distribution, but also handling of waste. And a lot of times in our culture, those are things that are not visible. So we give a very tangible visual representation of those systems. And I loved riding through the streets of Northampton with my 8-foot bicycle trailer behind me, totally teeming with bags of garbage and compost, and just seeing the looks on people's faces as they were realizing what that was. And really the encouragement about what is possible, like with human power. Another thing that I love about Pedal People is it was started with $500, and that was the cost of a bike trailer. And so it's a really accessible model for people to start their own cooperatives. There's a cooperative that was started in Philadelphia that was inspired by Pedal People, and also there's one being formed in New York City that was inspired also by Pedal People. And so it's a very accessible model to get in, and it might look different in other towns, but it's a really easy entry point. And so we also do distribution. We work with Valley Green Feast and also Enterprise Farm. And so we do once a week deliveries for both Enterprise and for Valley Green Feast. And I have a little statistic here that I was pretty impressed with. We started our compost program in 2007. And since 2007, we have hauled, by human power, 363,240 pounds of food scraps, organic food scraps. And so we haul them both to different sites around the city of Northampton, where people are taking those organic food scraps and turning those into compost. And the exciting thing about that is it plugs people into the food system. So once you start creating compost, you have to do something with that compost. And so it kind of comes full circle where you start growing or you start eating the vegetables more. And so it allows you to plug into that. And let's see if there's anything. Yeah, I think that was mostly what I wanted to say. We have currently 12 worker owners, and we make decisions by consensus. We have a monthly meeting where we make decisions. And like you said, it's really been a really empowering part of the whole process, is not being afraid to be fired. by bringing up certain issues and really being able to stick to your values in your workplace is one of my favorite things about worker-owned co-ops.
I think I'm batting cleanup, which is both a great position to be in and also a challenging one, because I get to hear all these great stories and then figure out what I'm going to add and change my notes and figure out how to follow all of this. I guess where I would start is first, I just want to thank Brian and Andrew for bringing this course forward. You know, when I was in college, the only way I could learn anything about co-ops was by setting up an independent study. Doing an independent study, looking at socially responsible business, you know, we did a bunch of case studies, and it was really interesting what we learned. You know, Equal Exchange was one of those case studies, which I went on to work for. And all the other 4 either went out of business or sold out. And that really struck me in terms of trying to create business models that are locally rooted, that stay true to their values, and yet can be successful. And the experience pretty much ruined me for working for any other kind of business. And luckily, I've been able to find ways to keep that work going. What's exciting to me about co-ops right now, you know, if you look around at what's going on in our economy with this continuing recession, with people wanting to be creative in their lives, you know, people are saying, wouldn't it be great if there was a business model that was democratic, that worked, that was rooted in community, that put people before profit? You know, and what's exciting about being in the co-op world right now is we actually had someone from outside the co-op world tell us how great we were. You know, 2012 has been declared the year of co-ops by the UN. United Nations recognized this business model, a business model, right? Not a nonprofit, not a social movement, a combination of a social movement and economic model for its contribution to economic resilience, community development, peace, and reconciliation. And it's really changed the way co-ops are thinking about themselves and recognizing that this model is one based on building the common good versus private gain. It's built on creating community wealth as opposed to stock market interest. And those values are really resonating with people. And what you're starting to see is co-ops looking at each other as communities as opposed to isolated entities. Isolated businesses in a hostile marketplace, you know, like the Valley Alliance of Worker Co-ops, bringing worker co-ops together to try to share their strengths. Similarly, the neighboring food co-ops brings together 30 food co-ops and startups with 90,000 people. You know, before we got together, no one really would have thought about that. You know, we would have thought about Greenfields Market as a very important anchor institution, but one in isolation. Now we recognize our food co-ops have about 200 million in shared revenue per year. If you look at local impact, those co-ops purchase 33 million in local goods and services. The impact is pretty astounding, and it's even more astounding when you realize it's all community owned. It's all democratically governed. It's all on a totally different type of business model. And that has enabled us to take risks together. You know, if you look around, this is also a very appropriate business model to look at in terms of food systems, because if you look at the innovations in the food systems over the years, whether it's organic agriculture, natural foods, fair trade, relocalization, it was cooperatives that were the leaders in taking risk and creating markets that didn't exist before. And now you see them in the mainstream, but it was co-ops that laid the groundwork. And what we're recognizing is it's not just us, right? If you look around us, I think we have important partners among farmer co-ops, for example. The majority of the 2 million farmers in the United States are members of cooperatives. Why is that? You know, the cooperative is a model that they can own, that helps them negotiate a hostile marketplace to build efficiencies and to make a difference in the market. And you see that not just in local farmer co-ops here in the Valley, like the Greenfield Farmers Exchange, which has been around since 1916, the Pioneer Valley Growers Association, which has been helping small farmers get their produce to regional markets for a few decades now. Members of Our Family Farms, Cabot, Organic Valley. People don't generally recognize the important role of these cooperatives in the food system. But we're beginning to realize ways that we can work together. And I think my experience at Equal Exchange was where that really started for me as a worker co-op, buying from farmer co-ops and selling primarily to food co-ops. There was a way to create a different economy. And fortunately here in New England, we've got a lot to build on. I don't think before this past year anyone would have realized there's 1,400 co-ops in New England, whether they're in food, worker co-ops, credit unions, municipal co-ops, energy co-ops, artisan co-ops, and those co-ops together have 5 million members. No one would have recognized that kind of success. And if you pull back a little bit more, I think this may be, the key thing I can bring to this panel here is trying to take us up a little bit higher and have a regional perspective. If you look nationally, there's 29,000 cooperatives. 1 in 3 Americans are members of cooperatives, whether they recognize it or not. So you go from this sort of crunchy alternative model based on participation and having more say in your workplace to realizing it's actually a very influential and successful business model that deserves to be taught in schools. In fact, I would argue it's malpractice that co-ops are not taught in schools. They have a dramatic influence on the economy, the food system, our work lives, and yet you would struggle to find them in any curriculum. I teach a course at the University of Connecticut. That is the course. That's the one course for a movement that includes 1 billion members worldwide. Co-ops worldwide employ more people than multinational corporations. More people are members of co-ops than own stock in the stock market. Does our curriculum reflect that? Absolutely not. I mean, it's embarrassing, frankly. So I think the opportunity we have here is to start to build on this recognition of our shared strength. The International Cooperative Alliance actually issued a challenge recently to consider 2012 not just the year of the co-ops, but the springboard for what they want to see as a cooperative decade. And I think that we have the beginnings of that here with co-ops working together, dialoguing across sectors, and thinking about what we can build together. So again, I just want to thank everyone else on this panel and for you guys for bringing this course forward and welcome your discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. That was awesome, everyone. And I think one thing that Urban said about creating alternative economies and bringing people across sectors, I think is what's really, really exciting, is that it's not, you can engage in a new economy with other people who are interested in engaging that same economy. You don't have to compromise your beliefs, and I think that that's something that's super exciting, and I think that the Valley, and especially, the whole world, but I think the Valley is really ripe for that change. So I just want to open it up to you all to ask questions.
I think so. And I have a really funny story that I can tell, which I was actually traveling to the NOFA conference in Connecticut with a woman that was an organic farmer from Organic Valley. Kind of an old school dairy farmer, really sweet, did a lot of family farming. And one day, a representative from Monsanto pulled up to their farm in a really nice car, blacked out windows, got out in a suit, and she's like, what are you doing here? Who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm from Monsanto. I wanna speak to you about what you're doing. And she called to her husband, and he was like, oh, tell him I just need to grab my shotgun, and then I'll be right there. And he left. He left in a cloud of dust. So it's like a really hilarious story that it sticks in my head. There is power within people that want to fight that system, and I think that the Organic Valley system of farmer cooperatives and the NFCA, there is connected power between, and Monsanto's everywhere and it's really scary, but I think the important aspect is cooperatives really want to educate about the good things that are going on. There's a lot of stuff out there, like the wonderful documentary, The Future of Food and stuff like that, that really scares you away from these things, but cooperatives, I think, are kind of inspiring you with the positive. So, I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think the only way to contest that is going to be through organizing, and I think Organic Valley is a great example of this. That they've really been able to push and lobby on the Just Label It campaign. You know, and that kind of leverage wouldn't exist there before if you didn't have a large, successful agricultural cooperative actually saying, like, no, actually what these folks are telling you is wrong, and we want this label here. And just to point out, again, this is a successful co-op. Last year, Organic Valley's revenues grew 14%, and they added another 200 members. You know, that says something about the ability of small family farmers being able to leverage their shared strength in the marketplace. And then, you know, by trying to work together cross-sector and find our common ground, we can lobby on issues like that. If we're not organized that way, we're not going to have any chance whatsoever.
So the membership package of VOC, at least for Valley Green Feast, it was really appealing because we were a sole proprietor before, and there's a lot of like legal documents and hoops to jump through when transitioning a business into a cooperative model, and a lot of people get scared away from it because it's just kind of too much. So having that support, having cooperative or people that are lawyers that are familiar with co-op law that are connected to the system. There's one person that is a staff person that is, you know, his position is funded by all of the co-ops. We like pay for him to organize, basically. And so being able to come together in those meetings and share resources and, you know, having that support, I think is really important. And I think the aspect of the development fund, it can be a little scary. You're like, why am I putting money towards this? But it's the staff person's job to organize and to show why it's really important. And there are some worker co-ops in the area that aren't necessarily involved in VOC. And, you know, it's kind of just their choice. They get to decide if financially it makes sense or, you know, if time-wise it makes sense. But I think a really special part about VOC is, though it is a system for worker co-ops, we have Friends of VOC. So Suzette is a representative from Franklin Community Co-ops, a consumer co-op that comes to meetings regularly. We have someone from the CFNE, which is the Cooperative Fund in New England, that regularly comes. Urban will come. So it's really like kind of just a meeting ground for people from all different places that want to support the same type of movement. So I don't know if you have other things. Urban.
Does that help explain it? Some of the co-ops in the Valley aren't worker co-ops. So
Explain that distinction.
Sure. Sure. A worker co-op, its members will be its employees. A consumer co-op will be the people who shop there. A producer or farmer co-op will be the farmers who contribute their produce or raw ingredients, artisan co-op, etc. It's only worker co-ops, but we've consciously created structures that invite participation from other sectors. So for example, when the Food Co-op Association gets together, we always invite a representative from VOC and representatives from farmer co-ops to be there, credit unions also, to hear what we're talking about, hear what our concerns are, and make sure we're also always searching for common ground. So we're supporting each other and organizing together on the issues that are important as sectors, they usually call them, and then also trying to work together across sector.
And like one more little thing, we go in together on shared advertising, so we'll all put money together and advertise all of our co-ops as one, or take a page out in the Advocate and have all of our logos there. And the staff person is working on a project now to do shared benefits. So looking into, you know, long-term disability, short-term disability, accounting, like how can we have VOC as an umbrella agency for support for these types of things that may be difficult for a new business to take on by themselves.
If I can just add, that's actually my co-op, Tessa, the Toolbox for Education, Social Action. Andrew over there is part of it. We're very young and we don't have a lot of money. And that's one of the reasons we decided to join VOC, was this prospect of future pooled benefits. Was, you know, first of all, not us having to track down what are the best avenues for that, but also then sharing that cost with other groups. Us not having to upfront that and manage that all ourselves was a huge, probably going to be financial and time burden off our shoulders. So that is, like, as in terms of like trying to start a business, as you know, people who are former students and have a lot of debt as former students and don't want to take on a business that has debt. That was one of our things, was to really lower costs, and that makes it a lot easier for us to start up a business and And if it makes it easier for us, it probably is going to make it easier for other people who are in similar financial constraints to, pool their resources and start a co-op if there's another entity that will help us share those benefits.
We had a workshop day long of focused on food co-ops here in Greenfield last year, and people from around New England came who were in all various stages of from just forming a small group to further along to opening stores, and that was a really useful setting to share lots of information. So I'm imagining that there might be more of those types of forums for that we could help host and put on, or that in collaboration with other entities be able to put on. And that's just in the food co-op area. That could also happen conceivably for other types of co-ops too.
One of the core challenges, and again, one of sort of the lessons from Mondragon and Emilia-Romagna, is it's associations that are going to make the difference. Because if you look at the business support systems out there for people who want to start a business, co-op is almost never on the list, right? There's no expertise in it. It's not even listed as an option. Well, if you want to start a business, you could do this, this, and this. Co-op's not even there. So I think it's crucial for us to be organized in associations so we can reach out to organizations in the community that provide that support and say, look, co-ops need to be there. So that we can say to community colleges, look, co-ops need to be on your list. You need to be teaching about these things, because I don't think it's going to happen otherwise. And to a certain degree, that's what these associations are here for. So if we have windows to share that information, such as courses you're delivering or other infrastructure here at the college, I think our networks are more than ready to come present and talk to people. But in the long run, we've got to figure out how to get co-ops into the community development dialogue in a serious way.
We develop educational resources for social and economic change, and we develop a lot of resources on co-ops, and for people who maybe don't have 15 hours to dedicate to learning about co-ops or experiencing co-ops, you can check out 2 of our resources that might give you a better understanding of what co-ops are, or you could use with other people. And that's one of those is Cooply, the game of cooperatives. It's really fun. And it's a great learning and teaching experience, and it takes a couple hours to play, and you can kind of get your feet wet about what it means to be a cooperative. And you can check that out at cooplygame.com. And the other is a website that we've developed and implemented, and it's an online hub for teaching and learning about cooperatives, and it's called cultivate.coop. The domain is www.cultivate.coop. And it's lots of people contribute to it every month from the cooperative world, and you can go on it and read articles and resources and contributions from co-op people, from anything ranging from what is a co-op to how do I get money to start up a co-op, and so on and so forth. So those are 2 quick, easy resources to plug into.
We've gone to career fairs, and that's, we've gone to elementary schools during career fair days and just set up a table and said, you can start a cooperative business to like second graders, to really get people thinking about this at a very young age, that this is a real legitimate option. And so infiltrating career fair days is one strategy that we could do. And another is, I have a friend that's teaching a course at UMass, and one of the culminating projects for that course is to write a cooperative business plan. And a lot of these students are seniors, or they're getting ready to graduate, and so they're leaving that class with a business plan to start a cooperative.
Some other people might have some from the States. This isn't, what I wanted to raise is actually where I think this is working amazingly well, and that's in Italy. Italy went through a period very similar to ours where the government was pulling out of social services in a very dramatic way, whether it was for immigrants or formerly incarcerated people or minorities. And something very different happened in Italy, which is that the cooperative movement stepped up and created legislation for a new type of cooperative called a social cooperative, whose specific purpose was service to marginalized individuals. And it became the fastest growing business in Italy at that time. Dramatic growth. There became thousands of them. The specific purpose was to provide gainful employment to marginalized people. And the reason that it worked is because the cooperatives were organized and had their own resources to apply to this type of development, because economically those folks couldn't do it on their own. They had to be integrated into a broader movement that shared their goals and values. And there have been some great experiments in that in the States so far. But I think what's been lacking is sort of that cohesive movement support to make sure that those models succeed. You know, we still have a little bit of that isolated business mentality, isolated enterprise mentality, rather than actually those co-ops are my co-op as well, and it's part of my goal to make sure they succeed. But there have been some great ones. Community Health Associates, is that the one in New York, which is a very large worker cooperative. I think it's about 1,300 healthcare providers, home healthcare providers, is a great example of a successful cooperative along those lines. All previously very low-income folks, primarily African American and Latina, almost 100% women, who are now the joint owners of this very successful business with, you know, more than 1,000 owners in it, delivering quality health care. So I think there are some models out there, but we're not as far along as some other communities are.
And just a relatively recently published book by John Restaskis. His whole book is a variety of examples of people coming together, forming co-ops, in some of them some pretty fringe work. One example was sex workers in India, basically taking charge of their business because they were getting out of the oppressed situation. And you know, we can have our various judgments about that, but the idea is that whatever situations people are in, when they can come together and take charge of their work and feel the empowerment from that, and then be able to better their lives and their community, there's progress there.
In terms of formerly incarcerated, I know there's a number of groups that are trying to start co-ops that address that, and I heard of one, and maybe one of you guys know if it came together or not, in Worcester, that was trying to start a co-op of formerly incarcerated folks who delivered biodiesel. Don't know if that came together or not. But there also, I think it was out of the same group that started this amazing youth co-op in Worcester called the Toxic Soil Busters, who in Worcester, you know, a formerly industrial town, has a lot of lead poisoning in their soil, and it's a youth-led co-op where they go around and they test soil, and then they actually decontaminate the soil. So anyways, that's an awesome example, but the same group who helped, I think, start them was looking at helping to start this other biodiesel delivery for formerly incarcerated folks, and I don't know if it came off the ground or not, but you check them out.
I have one more example, and it's of a women's co-op. I think it also is in Worcester, and this was a bunch of women that were recent immigrants, and I think they had a spectrum of legalness by U.S. standards, and they started a co-op. They were house cleaners, and they were getting sick from the toxic cleaning agents that they were having to use in these houses. And so what they did is they started a co-op. They started manufacturing their own green cleaning products. So they have their own line of green cleaning products. And then they also started a co-op so they don't have to be at fear of getting fired. So they started their own home cleaning co-op.
Yeah, and just to zoom out, just to kind of encapsulate all of it, one thing that I think is really exciting about worker cooperatives in terms of helping communities that have been exploited or excluded is that, for example, in U.S. law, you can't be an employee of a business if you're not a citizen. Like, we all know that. But you can own a business. So it allows, it allows the German guy to own the Mercedes plant in Mississippi. So if you see in the West Coast, there are a lot of folks who are not citizens but can start their own businesses and own them collectively. And on the other side of the coin, for incarcerated folks, there are a lot of legal stopping blocks to allow you to be employed. It makes it very easy to say, no, you can't be employed by our business. But then it gives you the power to come together and own a business collectively and bridge those gaps that have been intentionally created in our legal system. So I think that's just something that's exciting about the movement, that it allows people to access from all different angles.